Yeah.
This will decide how much of your interview goes into the final product.
Understood.
So if you answer it correctly, I will cut you. What is your favourite flavour of crisp?
I've been living in a paradise. It's awfully nice if you don't think twice. I've been living in a paradise ever since you made advances on me.
My name's Andy Murray. I'm the CEO. So I do a little bit of odd jobs here and there, but that's my official title anyway.
My name's Jason Allborn, but everyone calls me Jay. I am one of the founders of Not Games, one of the two co-designers of Not for Broadcast, co-writer with Alex and creator of the story, one of the two directors, and I write all the music.
My name is Alex. I'm one of the writers, directors. Not for Broadcast was kind of my concept, so I made the prototype with Jay, and here we are.
I'm Dennis. I am one of the directors here at Not Games. I am also the DOP and deal with all the post-production in terms of the editing, the photographs, and all the kind of the visual stuff that you'll see in Not for Broadcast.
Not for Broadcast is an FMV game that puts you in control of the national nightly news. You pick the shots, you censor the language, and it's up to you to decide how to represent the headlines, and the ramifications might surprise you.
What were your thoughts when you first found out the country was going into lockdown?
Oh, God.
We were working on pre-production for episode 2. We had a script that we were quite happy with. We had it cast, we had everything booked, we even had a wedding arch set up in the office ready for the first photo we were going to take. But you could see on the news, and you could see in Europe, that things were not going to be normal this year.
So we released episode 1 in January, and everything was going to plan. We sort of started work on episode 2. Jay and I had been writing it throughout February, and we were in a really good place. So because I kind of had it in my head that I was going to do this trip, so I was going to be away for like 4 weeks, and so I wanted to write as much as possible before I went, with the idea that I could write and do production and casting and stuff remotely during March.
We'd seen it coming. I had seen it coming. I think most of us in the office had seen it coming because it was all over the news. You could see it happening in other countries. Alex Patterson was in Australia, had taken a well-earned sabbatical after delivering his bit of the script for episode 2, and thought he had a clear month to be able to relax and have the sort of trip of a lifetime. And about a week into it, I'm sure he'll fill in the blanks, lockdown was announced.
Just finished a very good meeting with Prime Minister Johnson.
The Prime Minister is announcing strict new curbs on life in the UK to tackle the spread of coronavirus. From this evening, people must stay at home except for shopping for basic necessities, daily exercise, any medical needs, and travelling to and from essential work.
And I think I was driving people a bit mad in the office because I would pop in each day and say, I think we need to buy some webcams, I think we need to do this, and everybody would be like, no, we're getting ready for episode 2, we're going to shoot that. And it was this horrible week running up to the lockdown where over the week it kind of dawned on everybody at different times that we weren't going to do episode 2. That was hardest for Zara and Dennis because they were, like I say, 3 days out, and they had to just shut everything down. So I think they were the last to kind of admit that this was going to happen.
We had tons of stuff already pre-arranged. The pre-production had already been done for the whole shoot. So we were very much ready to go on starting shooting episode 2, which me and Sarah tried to hold off as long as we could, until I finally made the decision about 3 days before we were due to shoot that we had to just stop and we weren't going to be able to achieve this.
There's two kind of trains of thought really, particularly, I mean, for us, right, we're running a business, so there's the personal and then there's the professional, and oh God, is everyone going to be okay? I mean, I have asthma, so COVID's going to be a little bit of a worry for me, but I'm quite young and not horrifically unhealthy, so you know, I should be okay. And obviously that's just me, we've got everyone else at the company, all friends, family, etc. And then from a business point of view, how the hell do we film when you can't have someone in the same room breathing the same air?
So it was a bit of sort of going into the unknown feeling, as well as, is this actually going to stop us, or can we still push forward with filming?
Al was stuck in Australia, for one thing, because obviously he was on holiday, and that was mental.
The most scary part, whilst all that was happening, was I didn't have anywhere to live. Like, I was supposed to be doing this trip where, like, doing a day here, a day there, staying in all these different places, and Australia closed down, lockdown happened, and I was like, shit. Now I should go home now.
This was the first lockdown, so everything was, going to be super tight. We didn't know what was going to actually happen, but we knew something was going to happen. There were rumours that the army were going to be on the streets, and there were going to be checkpoints everywhere. People went a little bit mental. This is when you couldn't get toilet paper for love nor money.
None of us actually knew what this thing was. I mean, now we obviously know, and sort of Corona/COVID has been kind of the one word that everyone knows now for this year. But back then it was this unknown word, and we didn't know exactly what it entailed and what this virus was.
But luckily I found, through a friend of a friend, had a flat that I could stay in for a couple of weeks, so I got super, super lucky there.
How long did it take you to get back to England from Australia?
It wasn't actually that bad. It took about 2 weeks in the end, but it was really expensive.
So the moment you hear about a lockdown when you are involved in anything like TV production, actors, filming, anything, or even just running your own business, I think if that doesn't give you a little heart attack,
Occupational hazards.
then you are doing it wrong.
I think at the time it was kind of just so much adrenaline, like pure panic and stress and excitement as well, with this crazy new project and idea that we had that we were running with. To think back now, I can't believe we did what we did, that we, within days of, we were supposed to be shooting with 50 people and dancers and 25 something crew. Just mad to think back now to have all those people in one place and not really have to plan it like that.
Yeah, the priority really for me anyway was, is everyone going to be okay from a personal standpoint, and then how do we pivot? Do we shut down for months, or is there a way we can kind of keep going remotely, and if so, how the hell do we do that?
There was a lot of despondency in the team, because we really thought that we were not only going to have to stop, but there would be no money coming in. We'd be fucked, frankly. Wouldn't be able to pay our rent, wouldn't be able to pay our bills. The furlough scheme might have helped a bit. That would have paid 80%, but we didn't want to stop. And we were speaking with Ivan, our sort of main producer that Tiny Build assigned to us, but we got lucky, because Ivan's a very, very funny man and gets us.
Ivan and I go way back. He's a wind-up merchant who can't talk for shite.
And we were talking about what could we do, and the options were basically shut it all down and take no money, or forget doing episode 2 and just write the entire rest of the game during lockdown.
So we ended up having to basically write a whole new script, come up with a whole new idea of how to progress the game, but without touching too much on the main story, because we didn't want to have to rewrite episode 2.
It's quite nice though. I would recommend, if there is going to be another pandemic, any sort of global crisis in general, and you are going to be stuck somewhere, I would recommend Australia in March, because it's nice. It was hot. It was so good. Just sitting outside in the sun, doing some writing. It's actually, writing is hard at the best of times. I think most writers would say, distractions, such an urge to sort of procrastinate all the time, and I'm the worst. But I always say this to the guys, like, I love having written something. I really like being like, yeah, I wrote that, but the actual process of writing it is fucking torturous. I definitely found literally being on the other side of the planet to basically everyone that I know kind of a useful motivational tool, because it's quite hard to be distracted when you're in somebody else who you don't know's flat, and everyone you know is asleep. That was the thing that we were grappling with, was lockdown wasn't planned. The episode, I mean, but neither was, the crisis. But because lockdown wasn't planned, we wanted a way of doing something interesting and meaningful, but without fucking up what we knew we had to do in episode 2. So, like, how can we do something good that people will like and isn't just a throwaway sort of cash grab, but also get ourselves back on track for where we need to be in episode 2.
There were several ways that the game was adapted to fit into this lockdown remote shooting way. One thing that I really was pleased with was it allowed us to do alternates. Spoilers ahead for those who haven't played the game, switch off now. The lockdown sequence we decided should be a dream, which is one of the laziest, cheapest things that you're always told at school, don't make it all a dream. But the player at the end of the previous episode that we'd released had received this massive electric shock and blacked out, so we knew the player was comatose, which put us in a good position.
The dream thing, I remember it was night time for me. I was like Skyping in via phone to the morning meeting, which is 10:30 a.m. here. So for me, it would have been like 11 p.m, something really confusing like that. But I remember being on a balcony at night on the phone, and I trying to pitch to everyone this crazy idea I'd had that what if it was all a dream?
When the first idea initially came up, when we were discussing it in the group, I did say I was a bit like, is this a cop out? Like, is this not? This is not really what we do. Most of Jay and Alex's writing and Andy's sort of writing within the instance is it's really smart, it's really clever, it's really forward thinking. And there was that moment of, are we just having a cop out here? But I think it does work within the world that we have created and the moment that it happens. And we had that genius idea that Al came up with of the snuggle hugs.
Snuggle fucked? It's been almost 5 weeks since all the Mrs. Snugglehugs toys woke up simultaneously in factories worldwide and began searching for their husbands. The Mr. Snugglehugs we had so short-sightedly destroyed.
We also thought that in years to come, after this has all passed and we've got a vaccine, that this year and this weird pandemic would feel a bit like a weird fever dream of a few years ago that had happened and was unpleasant but was now kind of over. So we thought that played into it well. We decided very early to lean into surreality as the main humour stream because it could be done without touching nerves. So, being silly was going to be alright.
Are you alright, Jamboree?
It's Jeffrey. My name is Jeffrey Donington.
Being a bit off the wall, a bit dreamlike, surreality basically.
But everyone knows time moves differently underwater, Jeremy. That's why baths take so long.
That's right. And as anyone will tell you, the deeper the bath,
the quicker the relativistic forces of temporal causality will have a measurable effect upon the fixed dimensional parameters of your environment.
Yes, I've said that many times.
So we deliberately leant very hard into surrealist humour and stayed away from the politics of lockdown as much as we could.
What's that on your jacket there?
Oh, that's actually a sponge. What I've done here is made a snuggle-proof jacket, Jeremy. The network didn't bother sending me any PPE, so I've been forced to improvise.
We wrote a crazy dream sequence where the crew of the National Nightly News just weren't present.
Of course Megan's place looked lovely, but I can't see it, can I?
Thanks, Jenny. How's lock-in with the boyfriend going?
Decided to take his chances on the wild streets, eh?
You only vaguely hear about Jenny, and everyone else is locked at home, and you do your standard interviews, your vision mixing, all of this. It was the longest at the time level that we had in the game because we just kind of went with it, and it was funny and it was different, and I think to its credit it fits somehow in the space of 3 weeks. Al and Jay wrote a funny script that would fit with this crazy thing that had happened around the world.
Because the world was a lot depressing, it gave us a chance to mess around with stuff, play around with things that we were never going to get to do again, to try and keep things alive, keep things fun and interesting, and keep people guessing. We then of course found out that everyone else in the world that was doing lockdown shows, like Mythic Quest did a lockdown show where they did something really cool on Zoom. Like we did the Mr. Bear dance. We really wanted to mess around with the fact that we knew there were going to be 4 screens next to each other, and that real thing that's now been really done of passing stuff between screens, and I mean it's now been done by everybody, but it was nearly original at the time.
Again, while we might not have been the first, we were certainly one of the first to start doing that film. But we're a video game, so it wasn't a case of just filming it and going, look how clever are we managed to keep going. because then we had to edit it, we had to cut it, we had to put it into the game, we had to score the game. So by the time we actually got out at the end of June, every show near enough that was still going, or kind of was seriously still going, was now using webcams and remote filming and all these clever techniques and stuff like that. So we came out as one of the rest, rather than someone who'd kind of been innovative and done this crazy idea that had worked out.
And we were able to do all sorts of things. There's a meta game that we put in that we wouldn't have been able to do if there wasn't a game, which I'm not going to describe because people still haven't quite worked that out. We also really wanted to not have to veer off our main story, so we wanted, by the time the player reached the next actual chapter, to be able to still tell our story, which we couldn't do if we'd locked the country down, killed a reporter, all sorts of things that we wanted to do in the story. So a dream really helped us to do that. But there were two amazing things that came out of making it a dream. One was we could have the people in the newsroom directly address the player.
Alex, why don't you wake up, you fucking perv?
We could do short shots of Megan doing all these endings, so that Lockdown has lots of little endings where Megan just does a speech that's really specific to all the players' choices, and that was actually quite an easy way. I mean, it's lots of writing and sort of organisation to get it all to work, but that meant that we could actually have consequence that was meaningful, and meant that she literally calls you out and says, you did this and you did that, and that's bad or good or whatever it is.
The thing is, Pet, it's your marriage. You know Chris and Sam are close, and you've been really quite selfish. No, you have, darling. I'm sorry, but you have.
They can refer to things from your personal life, and one of the problems we'd noticed with the game was that the personal story that's told in between the levels didn't really cross into the main story that much, and the main story didn't cross into the family story, partly because that's often the way that your stories at work don't really impact your home and vice versa.
And because it's a dream, it's all taking place inside your head, that actually lets us close that gap for the first time. So if we hadn't done that, there's this massive separation between me, the player, the character, in the studio, mixing it, and on the other side of those screens, sort of in like a gameception, is, you know, Jeremy and Megan and the team. But because this whole thing isn't real and isn't actually happening, and it's all actually happening in the player's head, that way Jeremy and Megan and all that can be self-aware, and they can know what's happening, and they can know the things you've done back home, and if your kids hate you or anything.
And the adverts, of course, we were able to do multiples of those. For example, if your son has joined the Go-Getters, which is like might be a Hitler Youth organisation-ish, or maybe it's just a really well-funded youth club, depending on your opinion and how you play. We decided that if you'd sent your kid to the Go-Getters, then the advert that the government would put out during this lockdown dream would play on your subconscious fear.
They're probably safe. But I guess you never know what's lurking in the water. The advanced Go-Getters. We can't believe you fell for it.
Whereas if you hadn't let them go, then you'd have this different subconscious fear.
Why wouldn't you let your kids do that? After all, it's really just a particularly awesome youth club. The advanced Go-Getters. Why are you so paranoid?
That's how I ended up with all those sort of different alternates, was from the perspective of if this was all happening in your head and it was all a dream, what would that dream be like? Because we're a negative race, the human race, aren't we, and everything. We always see the worst in everything.
So lots of opportunities to do that in much less subtle ways than we would have had to do it had it not been a dream.
I think that's how I got them, was with that argument that if we make it all a dream, it can be like you're having this nightmare, and you can reflect your choices and all the things that you've done, and the consequences for that are like,
The solution to trying to shoot during COVID is not to bring anyone into the same room, really as much as you can. Now, 6 months later, there are policies and you can shoot in a COVID-safe way. And we've learned how to do that. But at the very beginning of lockdown, when we were washing every bit of shopping that came into the house, and, you know, everything was so tightly quarantined, the only way to solve that problem is to get everybody to shoot from home.
The biggest challenge, I would say, and I'm sure Dan will say this in his interviews, was having to film everything remotely to kind of go through. So we spent hundreds of pounds getting loads of different, like, very good quality webcams, getting Rode mics set, and we basically posted out sound equipment, video equipment, sometimes whole sets and costumes to people to build in their homes that we then filmed over Zoom, I think it was.
The care packages have been finished. This is just to give you a brief overview of what's happening. These are going to be sent out to all of our actors because we are working remotely. As you can see, they've got a nice little content system what's in there with their microphone, their USB cables, their mounting rigs, their tripods, the microphones and everything else.
We've got to do it under lockdown conditions. We've got to do it remotely from people's homes with no crew. You know, there was never any question of sending crew out or anything. It was like we all are going to stay in our own homes.
Which we did have protocols in place. You know, as kit was collected, we had a cleaning process that would make sure that whoever was collecting our kit was cleaning it, and we knew that if it was being collected by the couriers, they had a policy in place to make sure everything was handled safe. We had a cleaning station that I created inside each pack that I built for everybody. That had kind of wipes and everything else in there, because at the time we were very nervous about, you know, anything. We were probably overly cautious, I would say. But yeah, we were sending stuff, making sure that it had 24 hours in, you know, at people's houses before they actually touched it, so it could decontaminate. We had the wipes in there and everything else.
It was then the logistics after that got complicated. You know, we didn't actually have enough cameras and kit and microphones for everyone, because I mean the ideal thing, you just send 12 sets of cameras out, but that's crazy money. So it was sort of the logistics of sending out and passing them on, cleaning them in between.
One of our main actors is in what's called in Britain the shielding group, which means they have a pre-existing condition which makes them particularly vulnerable to COVID. And obviously the worst thing you can do is be responsible for the serious illness or even worse death of one of your lead actors. That's really poor management of actors. You know, it's pretty much first rule, try not to make sure everyone's alive at the end of it. So we knew we had to take it insanely seriously.
It was then all the sort of little things around there, like actually how are we going to get sound, and shit, this actor doesn't have a good enough computer to shoot, so we're going to have to send them one of our laptops and then get that returned. And then sort of the things of we need all the footage back as well.
Just the overall control of being able to move the camera is something you just can't do. I mean, we did one move, I think, in the whole of lockdown, but just being able to move the camera and being able to zoom in a camera and being able to, you know, you can't do any of that. You have zero control over it.
But my gut feeling from everything we've so far shot is that what takes the time is the tech. So getting the tech, getting set up, that takes ages, and then we've been finding we work with the actors and they nail it on the first, second or third take.
Well, on our budget, we had zero control of it. I'm sure there are things you can do, you know, with proper cameras and being able to remote control them, but from what we had of webcams and, you know, over Zoom, just very little control, you know, zero control over the lighting. You know, it's turn your living room lights on, turn your living room lights off, all natural lighting, which worked in our favour most of the time, but in Paul's situation, you know, worked against us.
Some people have noticed this in sequence 3 with Mr. Baberstock, who plays Jeremy Donaldson. There is a bit where the sun comes out behind a cloud because he's apparently got a window just directly behind the camera, and it makes him glow like a ghost. He becomes so pale.
That was a moment when my heart died when we got it back into the suite, the post suite. We are in the edit phase of the process, and I've used that word fix it in post quite often, and most of the time I've been alright. On this occasion, wish I'd never said it. When you're not there and you're just seeing it over a screen, the sun was so slow and so gradual that your eye doesn't quite pick it up. It's like when you live with someone and they grow up, you don't notice them getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but if you don't see that person for months and months, you notice the change in their height. It's exactly the same with light. Essentially what that was Paul was sitting in his chair and he had a window above him, and I did mention it at the time. I said, look, I think we should cover that window just in case, but because we were quite strapped for time, because obviously Paul has to do everything that we ask him, and he was trying to prep for this quite difficult scene that he had, but of course when you're remote everything has to be done by them at home, So it was just one of those things that when we mentioned it, we were just like, actually, let's just leave it. And it's something that I wish we'd just done and taken the extra hour, because in post it was an absolute nightmare. Colour correction has been a bit of a bitch, to be honest. And it's all because couldn't cover a light up. If you watch the shot all the way through, you don't notice it. But because, of course, when you're cutting between the cameras, when you jump back to him, he's just like bleached out and his face is all white and it's just awful.
There's so many things, and like obviously he doesn't know. He's not in. He's in front of camera, not behind it. He doesn't know everything he needs to tell us. But that became the biggest thorn, I think, in Den's side.
It's one of those shots in the game that if I can, I'm going to go back and try and work out a way of maybe deep faking it or doing something to fix it, because it's one of the moments in that episode which I'm really happy with, but it's the moment that I look at and go, that's not good enough. That's not up to the standard of where we have been.
The time delay for comedy is killing. So when we first got the takes back and we put them into the game and we watched them, it was a horror show, because there was a little pause or a little beat or a little bit of speed up, slow down, whatever it might be, where the cue hadn't reached the next actor at exactly the right moment for comic timing to work.
Because we were doing it remotely, there were obviously gaps in as everyone who's used Zoom, which is most of the world now, will know, sometimes you get a disconnect or people kind of falling back behind each other. So I think the worst culprit was one of the variables for the first sequence.
Comedy is so about, it's like music, it's to the millisecond, and beyond it. The difference between going aha and going aha one fraction of a second later is funny or not. When we watched it back the first time, it was awful. It was laborious, really unfunny. So we had to go through the entire thing. Andy will tell you, and maybe has told you about this.
I basically had to go through and manually speed up or slow down pauses in between people speaking to make it sound like it was all one coherent conversation. To this day, there are 3 specific parts of the Wild Sophia interview where I know, and every time I watch it, I know that I've sped it up, but I have yet to have anyone tell me about it. So I'm fairly sure no one else knows, and it's just me because I spent half a day doing it. But we got there, ish.
I'm not sure the actors know that we had to do that, actually. They may not even be aware. They may think that was their comic timing, which, to be fair, on the day it was. So yeah, that was a real unforeseen, massive difficulty.
Then there are other things that just you don't think about more than anything. The things that really have fucked us time and time again. I mean, so many times we've been stung by deliveries and couriers, and oh man, God, I never would have thought that would be such like a thorn in my side of my life.
Because obviously we had to send everything because we were doing it remotely. Was getting the equipment to everyone, and that just turned into an absolute ball ache. We're just about to send the care packages off to the first load of actors. There is going to be a taxi arriving any minute now. It's the only way that we can get them. The courier services aren't running a normal service, so we're having to stick them in taxis and drive them to the first actors' houses. So here's hoping everything goes well and these packages arrive safely to our actors. So that was something that we just thought would happen and turned into, honestly, it was a full-time job trying to manage everything.
So the main challenges we face during COVID conditions are technical, because once you're with the actors, the process is the same.
And we end on a big musical number. There's dancing. It's repetitive, so it's catchy, but not too challenging. If you like, I'll go and get my boombox, shall I?
Right, yeah, I think I might have something. Hang on, can we get Angie back?
Why not? The more the merrier, as they say at orgies.
Whether they're working remotely, whether they're in the room with you. When we're filming a proper episode, while the actors are doing their stuff, most of the creative top line are not in the room with the actors. They're watching screens because you want to see what it's going to look like on screen. So actually sitting watching 4 actors camera shots on Zoom, that process isn't that different. And both Al and I commented to each other that actually once you get going, once the tech is set up, the creative process is actually still the same.
We're very lucky that we have a lot of very talented actors, so it did involve a lot of trust, really, that we'd run the scenes quite a lot. I knew these guys, knew the characters, so you kind of just have to trust that they are good. That was part of it. It was just kind of letting go as a director to a degree and saying, you know this cast, they get it, they're funny and they get it. Just kind of, once you've done all you can, when you're actually shooting, you kind of just have to let go a little bit and just trust that it will be good. And thankfully it was.
For something that I wouldn't say we chucked together in a couple of weeks, but for something that we managed to go from literally the idea, we had nothing 3 days before we were due to shoot episode 2, to having this completed, finished idea that is well-rounded and fits in with the story and is fun and enjoyable and introduces new mechanics. You know, this whole thing is just, I'm really chuffed with it. You know, it's part of the game that I actually sit back and I'm quite proud of.
We did it. We released Not for Broadcast Lockdown on June 25th, 2020, and people liked it. The response was really good, but we couldn't enjoy it for too long because we're so far off schedule, and we had to figure out how we were going to do episode 2. God, it was such a God-blessed relief to finally be able to shoot in person. Like, I cannot tell you how worrying it was. Like, fuck, are we ever going to be able to shoot this? Like, it felt like, I'm sure everyone remembers, like, how it felt being in lockdown, thinking, fuck, is this life now? Are we going to be able to make anything resembling normal TV or film this year? So yeah, it was such a relief.
Oh, it was lovely. It was one of those moments where you feel like you've got the gang back together. Being back on set was so lovely, and you get that. There's a sense that we get, because we don't get to do it all that often. We shoot and then we have tons of time putting it all together, and you forget about how good it is actually to be while you're shooting.
Little Dean, I could be smiling after this.
You're paying me, so I'm going to go with yes.
Do a dance. Do the dance. do your dance.
Oh, no,
thank you. That's it. Right, we can pay him. Accepted invoice.
Oh, it was so nice. It was so nice to be able to, as I was saying, all of those problems that we had shooting lockdown, being able to have full control, being able to be on set with everyone, being able to laugh and joke with people and to interact and, you know, have that buzz of being on set.
The actors, this one, loosey goosey, shake it off. Whoa. Keep the energy up. Try something a bit different. Don't corpse, but try and make each other laugh. Try something you've wanted to try. If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter, because we've already got a kick-ass shot. And at the end of this one, when I call cut, just everybody freeze, because we're going to pick up exactly from where you are. Wicked. Okay. Enjoy. You've already smashed it, so it doesn't matter if it goes terribly wrong. Just roll with the punches. Here we go.
It feels a lot more creative and more ideas bubble up when you're in a team and you're laughing and you're having fun.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Remember we talked about her entrance, so Megan does the thing, and we were wanting to make it almost a bit more
more
showy, that we might, obviously we don't have it right now, but like, do we want to leave a little bit of space and do a little thing in case we want to put a jingle or like
I can definitely jingle it afterwards.
Because we almost, that sort of late show, they come out and she stands up, I was like,
that's great. Let's do that, and I'll put the music on afterwards. Yeah, that's great, because then whatever timing they do it, we'll just write a bespoke thing.
We could even, maybe, we don't have to, but it could be, we could teach add the sound effect there in the same way that we did with Blunderclash. And you can just go, right, you're going to have to put some applause in at this one when she enters. And just give them one sound effect to do to teach them, right, this is the sound effect thing. Press the applause when she comes in. In the next segment, directly afterwards, is then when you get
Yes, and it can be training for the new mechanic. That's really good. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Glad you caught that.
We'll see. If this bit's included, we did that.
Let's give it up and welcome Lil C.
So yeah, just the best feeling. It's my favourite place to be in, especially with these guys. You know, with me, you know, Zara coming in and making everything look pretty and beautiful, and you know, adding another sense of comedy. You know, into the mix, and you know, on top of me, Andy and Al being around, and it's just amazing. The best place to be. Wouldn't change it for the world. It's so much fun.
It was a real rush and relief to be able to film something properly. But the caveat with that is that it involved a lot of extra work and planning and people's time.
It's been like pretty full on, actually. I mean, most of the stuff is pretty straightforward. It's a case of, if you do these things, we can be as safe as we possibly can. But it is quite constant, and sort of the thing is, people get into a habit, or old habits. They get used to what they used to do when they were on set, and so it's a case of being like, can you just not do that, or let's take a second and figure out a way to do it that makes everybody safe.
I think everyone would agree that it was so worth it. Like, the actors have been stuck inside, and obviously it's not a great time to be self-employed right now, so a lot of actors were champing at the bit to get back to work, and lots of people to get back to work. So yeah, I mean, I think the feeling was amazing. It was so cool to see people just back on the top of their game again.
One of the biggest things is obviously they released like the BFI and all these kind of film industry standards, set these guidelines, and obviously there's government guidelines in terms of how to keep everyone safe during COVID. So Zara, bless her, had to go through and read the 44, 60 odd page document, whatever it was, there are a few of them, and condensed them all down to kind of 11, 12 page document that we all had to read and kind of go through. Everyone has to wear a mask unless you directly can't wear a mask for what it is you're doing. So if you're in front of camera acting, can't wear a mask, but otherwise you're expected to wear a mask all the time on set. Everyone had to bring their own food. We couldn't provide food for people because obviously contamination and all that jazz. We have to kind of scrub down the office. We had to get cleaning done every single day, and kind of anti-bac every common surface, door handles, light switches. We tried to keep crew and cast down to as minimum as possible, because obviously the idea is if you're bringing people together, as we had to, and particularly within an enclosed space, so we needed to make sure that sound quality was good, which meant having no ventilation, which meant keeping numbers to a minimum, keeping the windows open during every single, as soon as cut was taken. We had a COVID officer on set every single day whose job was to make sure everyone was wearing masks, everyone was changing masks halfway through the day, all the windows etc. were opened during the breaks, and that we kind of didn't do anything more than we absolutely had to, where we were theoretically putting people at risk.
That's just one half of it. The other half, and it's equally important, is the actors have to feel safe. Sometimes you might be taking a precaution that might be actually seen as technically unnecessary, but if it makes your performers feel safe and like they're being protected and looked after, then that's one less thing on their minds, which means that they can focus on the performance. There's very, very few jobs in the world where you can't take even a beat to stop working, and just have a little think. But when you're on stage or on film, from the moment action is called to the moment cut is called, you can't miss a beat. You can't even allow a stray thought, because the camera is here and the viewers look straight to your eyes. And what that means, obviously, for an actor is you have to have every thought in place. Everything has to be right, and it has to be consistently right for this game, because you're going to take the whole take. So for a character like Jeremy Donaldson, with his big dramatic sequences, where at one point all the cameras are on him, all 4 cameras, mostly in close, he can't drop a beat. If Paul for a moment doesn't know what he's going to say and has to think about that, it will not look the same as if he is acting that Jeremy Donaldson is having trouble finding words, because they're slightly different. And Shakespeare, for example, said, I can't believe I'm going to get this wanky, but I genuinely am. Shakespeare said the purpose of theatre now and always was to hold the mirror up to nature and to reflect things in their true form. And that single note goes to the heart of what an actor has to do. Removing from the actors the fact that they're living in a coronavirus world, even if just for the 12 minutes of a take or the 7 minutes of a take, is really important, and it's really hard because all of the cameramen facing them are masked. Everybody in the room is masked except them. So it is a real testament to the actors that I really think that we've managed to make an episode 2 that feels like it's made in a world without coronavirus. And that's down to the subtleties and the brilliance of the actors. All we could do as a directorial and a production team was keep them as safe as possible, over safe, if possible, so that at least they were not worrying about that. They could relax and do the job, which actually, by the point we were shooting, where the country had been in lockdown by this point for 3 or 4 months, everybody was really ready to feel that way. A lot of people commented at the end of the day, both that they had felt really safe, but also that it was so nice to be back in a room with real actors. I can't believe I ended up playing Shakespeare again.
You did it.
I can't help it.
It happened. How do you think episode 2 compares to episode 1?
It's better.
The difference between episode 1 and episode 2 for me is the progression in the story, the effects of the consequences of the choices that you've made in the previous levels actually start to come to fruition, and you have impact on your consequence.
During level 4, it's the bit with Peter Clement. So this is a variable, so this will be based on how strong advances seem to be in the country, which is basically in terms of how confident the prime ministers feel. But the idea is that you can kind of portray them in this kind of slightly more negative, struggling government who have all these liberal ideas but can't quite deliver, or you can show them as this beacon of kind of grace and utopia where they are actually bringing equality and helping people doing all of this.
Don't worry, everybody. Don't be afraid. Don't even lose a wink of sleep. We knew the rest of the world would react this way, and we're ready. As my old mum used to say, you can't make a shite pie without blocking a few toilets.
It's certainly true that Advance's popularity
He's on the fucking wane! Yeah, let's go with this bollocks again, shall we? Actually, you know what? Nah, fuck this. I'm done with this.
Prime Minister, please don't storm out.
No! I have had enough of you, Mr. Jeremy Donaldson and your Snyder side. You think you could make a better job of things, do ya? Because it's not that fucking easy, let me tell ya.
And if you lean more towards the fact that they are struggling and that their ideas are radical and actually not necessarily the best for the country, Peter Clement is, how do I say this? Well, he's drunk on that foreign correspondence interview, and he basically loses it, and he properly lays into them, and it's a really nice bit where he goes,
I'm sorry for the outburst, Miss Wolf. Julia thinks very highly of you, and I know you're not the one making the editorial decisions.
And it's a nice kind of almost call out to the player of, the game is fucking watching you and we know you're making us look bad and there will be consequences. So Jay likes to compare it to the Star Wars original trilogy, right? And he likes to consider this The Empire Strikes Back.
I've said it a few times in the office, and I don't know if it's caught on yet. I'm trying to get other people to say it, but I bet no one else will. It's our Empire Strikes Back. Our first one was our Star Wars. It's light. It introduces you to characters. It sets up a world, and it tells the beginnings of a story. But it's obvious there's more of that story.
We're hoping that episode 2 is darker. This is again another example of those things that we take for granted as the developers who are so in it and we know what's coming. Is that when we released episode 1, we were billing it as this like dark, dystopian news simulator, and we really pushed the sort of Black Mirror-esque themes.
You know who we are. You've seen our symbols on your walls. You've heard them talk about us on the news. We are disrupt.
But to be fair, and people, they're right, episode 1 doesn't necessarily get there yet. There's not a lot of darky dystopianness. It's just like, oh, this quite radical political party come in and they're doing some socialism, but it doesn't seem that bad. But episode 2 delivers on that darkness.
Episode 2 is where shit gets real and it doubles down on the conspiracy. It starts to give the player more consequence in the incident system, particularly between the levels. The cross connection of your personal world and the world of the news begins to come together, and that will come even more so in the final episode.
The next 2 bits that I like dramatically are at the end of level 5 and the end of level 6. So for anyone who's played it at this point by the time you're watching it, and again, if we haven't already flashed this, spoiler it, because these are really big spoilers. But level 5, so when Jeremy has the gun, I think it's B, or what we class as B, where you haven't watched the tape, and he doesn't know that it's Alan James who's kind of fronting the resistance, and he doesn't know that kind of big aspect to it, right? I'm getting Alex laughing at me now because that's another big spoiler, and I've already warned anyway. So,
What do you mean they didn't play it? Why the fuck didn't they play it? Alex, what the heck is wrong with you? You had a chance to make a real fucking difference.
Jeremy, calm down.
You fucking calm down. How long?
essentially, when you kind of go through with this and you see him defend, again, it comes back to this journalistic integrity for me, in that he's not doing it because he doesn't agree with Advance or he agrees with Disrupt. It's not about what he believes. He just wants everyone to have both sides, and that's so important that we're losing that. You get political censoring that starts to come in level 4, and then even more so in level 5. And it's this idea that Advance is shutting down the news and making a kind of TV show where it just entertains the masses and stops them asking questions, asking things that, as far as Advance is concerned, that they shouldn't. And it's really interesting seeing Jeremy try and defend, ultimately potentially with his life, this idea of whether or not everyone should hear all points of view, or whether or not the news should be just portraying ultimately what are facts or opinions, and how do you distinguish between those and stuff like that. And particularly now in the modern world, where we have all this kind of fake news and things like that, it hits home, I think, quite well, that in order to really have an informed opinion, you have to know both sides, and you have to have that balance.
And I really like that it ends downbeat, like Empire does.
Good evening, citizens and leaders of the world. Minutes ago, operatives working for Advance detonated nuclear explosives simultaneously in 4 major cities across the continent.
When I went to see Empire Strikes Back when it first came out, and I'd not seen that before, I'd not seen a movie where at the end they didn't win. Things were worse than when the movie started, like a child's version of Breaking Bad, you know, as things got worse. And I think it's fair to say that in this episode, in episode 2, things get very real, and things do get worse for the world, for the characters. I really like that.
My favourite moment of episode 2 to watch as being in the room was Megan's delivery of the final headline in level 6, and that was purely because of the change of tone from what we'd been filming all day, and being in the room, there was a real sense of everyone was just, there was complete silence, and she delivered this line and the emotion was fucking raw, and it was amazing to watch.
I don't really talk about my personal life in my job. It's not relevant or important. So many of you may be surprised to learn that I have a brother. His name is David. And right now I can't get his stupid face out of my head. He's a researcher and he's currently travelling the continent for work. And I don't know where he is right now.
And you only get this ending if your daughter is abroad, because your daughter is in one of those places where the bombs come.
Megan's speech is insane, but what really triggers the tear is Jenny and her reaction to what Megan has just said.
And we're out. So he'd have loved it.
Jenny, for who's just been through an incredibly traumatic experience with somebody who she thinks of or thought of as a friend, who has essentially held her at gunpoint. And Sarah had to bring all of that emotion that she'd been suppressing through the various pre and post roll sequences and allow it to come out. You'll notice when you play this level that Sarah's reactions throughout Jeremy's breakdowns and in those ends are just pitch perfect and so real and so believable, even in close-up. She's so in it, and Megan is such a good actress that that dynamic was very strong. So then we reached the third speech, and Andrea said, do you mind if I change the name of the brother character? And I was like, why? And she was like, because I'd like to substitute it for a name that means something to me. So we changed the name of the character to David from Darren. So it wasn't a big change, and it wasn't like she wanted to change the name to like Peter Clement or, you know, Jeremy Donaldson or anything crazy like that. And by the end of the speech, Sarah, playing Jenny, was genuinely crying, which meant that that little sequence at the end that they play together, that is real tears that are happening there. I definitely let a couple of tears out. I know Anna let a couple of tears out, and this time when I went back into the main room where the shooting was done, you could see that it had affected everybody. It was just a stunning day. I mean, it was just a tribute to the insane talent of our actors that these 3 speeches have all come out so well. The sheer honesty of Jenny and Megan's performances. And although those sequences are not tremendously long, certainly not by the standards of not for broadcast, but they are still full monologues from an actress on camera, with the camera right here and closing and closing and closing, giving you no escape. Yeah, just amazing.
And I should imagine that there are many of you sitting at home tonight digesting this news, and you also have loved ones on the continent, in Urkistan or Havia or San Palmerino or Konislava, which is where David was when I last spoke to him 3 days ago. So when I tell you I know how you are feeling tonight, believe me, I do.
On the flip side, right, just to lighten the mood a little bit, because we've been ranting and very, very serious, there are a couple of really, really fun. I mean, I love Jeff Algebra. I think he's great.
Do I look like the sort of person who counts things?
I really loved the theatre stuff. So that's Tommy Harris and Jeff Algebra and Philippa, who we went out to the theatre for one day to film Tommy Harris, his sort of self-autobiography play that he's put on about his life. And we got to go to a big empty theatre and just fuck around and just film some really funny shit, most of which doesn't even make it in because it's being played underneath the interview, so you never actually hear any of the good stuff.
Now we're going to jog on the spot, and now we're going to gallop on the spot. We're wild horses, neigh with me, neigh! Very good, very good.
So we got them to just improvise a load of like physical theatre movement stuff. That's just so funny. Like, there's an amazing clip where Tommy Harris, Adam, they're doing like a warm-up, being led by Jeff Algebra, giving them a warm-up, and he's like getting them to visualise this scene.
Listen to the birds. Listen. Let's call to them. Call with me. Birds. You know. We're verbally calling. Bird. No! For fuck's sake!
I'll give you the clip to put in at this moment because it's fucking funny. And it's in that shoot as well was we thought it'd be really funny. It was Jeff Algebra because he mentions that at some point he does his best work with his trousers off, which was just a stupid joke that I thought was funny that he would say that. But then when we came to actually shoot like this montage of the process, we just wanted a couple of him just in his pants, and obviously Dan Foley, who plays Jeff, offered and has his own Y-front, so I was like, I can just bring these comedy Y-fronts that I own, so that was handy. So there's one where they're stood on the stage and we're sort of off the front, so slightly below the level of where they're stood, and in the background we've got Tommy and Philippa looking to Jeff as he's giving them a speech and just sort of nodding really seriously, and he's just got his back to camera, but it's just his arse is like filling up most of the frame, and we just are focused on them nodding really sincerely, and then just pull focus just to his arse, and he just reaches down and scratches his bum. It's just the amount of times we had to do that because I kept laughing, which is just the theme for a lot of this stuff, is that I ruin a lot of takes by laughing, and the actors rightly get annoyed with me as they've been holding it together perfectly and I just crack up at my own jokes, which is embarrassing.
Bring me the
Keep rolling, we'll get there. more interesting story and so many changes, and episode 2 is going to blow people's minds. I think it's phenomenal.
You can expect more content, more laughs, more of this.
Hopefully you will not watch this documentary until you've played episode 2. So what you're asking really is what will happen next, and what will happen next is episode 3, the final episode, with multiple different endings, all sorts of interesting new mechanics. The world that you create through your editing, through your home life, will come to you in that broadcast room in ways that are quite extraordinary.
I mean, obviously we know where this story is going to end, right? In terms of episode 3 and what we're going to do, and basically by the end of next year, that'll be the full release done.
Episode 3 is going to be even bigger, even funnier, even darker. It's going to be explosive.
I've got a real feeling that once people play episode 2, I know they've been long awaited episode 2 and they've been waiting for it. Once they play that, they are going to be desperate for episode 3, because it is cliffhangers all over the place, and it's just really good. It's a superb bit of writing from the guys, and the way we've shot episode 2 is just, everything has had an increase in production value, so it has tons to look forward to in episode 3. Buy it, go buy it.
It's really important on a production to make sure you seal doors so that the actors can't reconsider their contracts. Yeah, it's really important, because they will try to leave once they realise how much they're getting paid and what they're being asked to do. So this is just standard procedure for us. He makes us do